Yeah, hi folks. Wow, National is now the party with the most support. Ooh, that makes me feel so warm and fuzzy inside. If they win, we can have the same again. But on the positive side, at least we won't have to see Ardern again, except when she preaches from the UN, that is. Anyway, today I want to cover the Three Waters scam, an interesting video about how Donald Trump could become president again before 2024, and the Ukraine war.
I got it wrong and I accept responsibility. That's a message from the local government minister who says she underestimated how much the public knew about water management. But Nanaia Mahuta's committed to continuing with the Three Waters reforms. Here's Q&A's Jack Tame.
Three Waters is perhaps this government's most contentious proposal, and the minister responsible admits she's made some mistakes.
There are two areas of the Three Waters reform program which I underestimated, and I acknowledge that's my responsibility. The first one is that I underestimated that the public really knew what was happening with pipes under the ground, and they had a lot more knowledge about the trade-offs that councils were always making.
And not only that, they had a lot of knowledge about the iwi scam that is going on here, and the other iwi scams at the councils, and the name changing that's going on around New Zealand.
Dozens of councils opposed the reforms, which would bring drinking, storm and wastewater out of their control and into the management of 4 regional entities.
Imagine Aotearoa without good water.
The government's efforts to win over the public with an advertising campaign ended up backfiring.
And I acknowledge that decades of underinvestment in water infrastructure is within the council purview, but perhaps the advertising campaign wasn't the best way to tell the message. So again,
yeah, especially starting with the name Aotearoa.
And those are two areas that I underestimated that I got wrong, and I accept responsibility for that.
But on Q&A, Nanaia Mahuta stood by the proposed co-governance model, which would see Māori make up half the representatives on the new entities' boards.
It's very interesting to note the dissenting voice, your former colleague, Phil Goff, and fundamentally there is an opposition from many to the co-governance model that is enshrined within your Three Waters legislation. Phil Goff says he supports partnership as opposed to co-governance. How is it democratic to have unelected Māori making up half of those seats, half of those representatives on the Three Waters boards?
Well, it's not democratic at all. It's just a scam to make millions.
The Three Waters reform has been wrongly described by some as a Māori asset grab.
There's a view being promoted by some of the councillors around the country that this is a Māori grab for power.
Well, of course it is. Why are you even there?
Co-governance is part of that transformative change.
No, it's not. Co-governance is not in the treaty. And here he is pushing that separatist BS that is dividing our nation. That's exactly what people don't want.
That means equal number of iwi, equal number of council bringing their collective skills.
Now, what special skills do Maori have regarding water that no one else has? Now, here's the Donald Trump clip, which is obviously a long shot, but interesting nonetheless.
Good to see you this morning. I mean, do we think this is actually happening? Is he serious about going forward in 24?
I think everyone wants to know that, but actually, let me tell you what Trump has been doing, because it could be earlier than 2024 and not because the election will be overturned. Trump has been endorsing candidates in each of the different states. We're kind of fed up with the rhinos, which are Republicans in name only. And the other thing is that what people don't understand is that the U.S. is a republic. And in that, you have to think of it like we're 50 different countries And so he wants to really support state legislatures and secretaries of state so that a lot of the problems that happened in 2020 can get cleared up. But this is the talk that has been going on for 6 or 7 months. And that is right now, 29 Democrats in the House have said they're not running again. The prediction is we're going to take the House and the Senate. They're talking about Trump being the Speaker of the Senate, and then he will be able to impeach Biden and Harris, and he will be able to take over because he'll be third in line to do that.
Yeah, now I think Biden could easily be impeached from the border debacle to the Afghanistan debacle, but I'm not too sure about Harris. Maybe this, perhaps.
The trial record was a complete joke, hearsay upon hearsay, and we've opened Pandora's box to future presidents. And if you use this model, I don't know how Kamala Harris doesn't get impeached if the Republicans take over the House, because she actually bailed out rioters, and one of the rioters went back to the streets and broke somebody's head open.
And this is a lot of the conservative commentators have been talking about this with a lot of detail. Dan Scavino, who handles his social media, keeps sending hints out to us. We get messages in circuitous ways, but don't jump to 2024. I really think what we have to watch is what's going on in the state.
Forgive me, Jan, for jumping in, but I can't help but reflect, because we're talking so much about Russia at the moment. If this was some sort of strategy that Vladimir Putin had used in the past to try and retain or regain a position, we'd be calling it totally corrupt, wouldn't we?
Well, see, you're jumping ahead and not looking at it from the perspective of the U.S. The fact is that people want to recruit him to be the speaker. I'm not saying that that is Trump's plan, but the conservative people have been talking about that because the Speaker of the House does not have to be an elected official. All I'm saying is watch what's happening in the states. Watch the people that Trump is endorsing. Watch after the midterms what happens, because if we take the House, then things are going to turn upside down.
Anyway, back to the war. Now, even though this is old news, I think it is important to show this for a little bit of balance.
And while most Americans stand behind Ukraine's struggle to protect its democracy, it was just a few years ago that top Ukrainian officials were working to undermine our own on behalf of Democrats. Now, as journalist Paul Sperry reminds us in an incredible new article, the improper, if not illegal, operation was run chiefly out of the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, where officials worked hand in glove with the Ukrainian-American activist and Clinton campaign operative to attack the Trump campaign. But it turns out the Democrat-Ukrainian collusion predated the 2016 election, Sperry reports. The coordination between Ukrainian and Democratic officials can be traced back to at least January 2014, when top Obama diplomats began engineering regime change in Kyiv, eventually installing a Ukrainian leader they could control. Now, you might recognize some of the individuals involved in this scheme, chiefly Jake Sullivan and Victoria Nuland, both of whom now serve in the Biden administration. Now, Nuland just made headlines this week by testifying she was worried about Ukrainian biolabs falling into Russian hands. But on January 27, 2014, Nuland was on the phone with the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine plotting regime change in the country.
I think to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it and, the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it.
When I wrote the note, Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So okay. Biden's willing.
As Paul Sperry notes, Nuland's involvement wasn't limited, though, to phone calls. She was on the ground in Kyiv organizing protests against the pro-Russian government. It paid off. That regime was overthrown, and a pro-Western government took its place. Now, 2 years later, the Ukrainians repaid the favor by working hand in glove with Democrats to then dig up dirt on Donald Trump and help swing the 2016 election to Hillary Clinton. That's what they wanted. Joining me now is Paul Sperry, investigative reporter for Real Clear Investigations. Paul, what do all these connections tell us about Ukraine as it truly is and our stance as it is today?
By the way, Laura, by the way, there's a great summation. So there's a lot of politics behind this crisis, and it's important to put it into historic context. Starting in 2014, when Obama appointed Biden as his point man in Ukraine, and his team of advisors and diplomats engineered a regime change in Kyiv, and they installed essentially a client state for Democrats there. And as you said, they were caught on tape trying to push out the president at the time because they felt that he was too friendly with Russia. And Victoria Nuland, who you mentioned as well, she was actually over there handing out sandwiches to the rioters in that revolution. And then, of course, Putin took that U.S. meddling as a threat. And within months, he was invading Crimea. So that's the backstory up until 2016. And so then in 2016, Biden's people helped Hillary weaponize Ukraine to try to derail Trump's campaign. And Ukraine went along with it because they were getting billions of dollars in aid from Biden. And they honestly thought that Democrats would do a better job of protecting them from Russia. But that was a bad bet.
That was wrong.
Yeah, and once again, they're throwing them under the bus with by not giving them the MiGs. But America has cheated elsewhere as well, but so has Russia.
Ukraine once had the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. It had 176 intercontinental ballistic missiles, 1,249 nuclear warheads, 44 strategic bombers, 700 nuclear-tipped cruise missiles, and some 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons. Ukraine inherited them from the Soviet Union, but Kyiv had to give them up. In 1994, Ukraine joined the NPT, or the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Ukraine entered as a non-nuclear weapons state, which meant Kyiv had to transfer all its nuclear warheads to Russia. It also had to dismantle its strategic delivery vehicles. In 1996, Ukraine gave up its last nuclear warhead. In 2001, its last missile silo was demolished. The once coveted nuclear-powered state today stands disarmed with Russian soldiers breathing down its neck. When Ukraine joined the NPT, world powers committed to protect its sovereignty. The United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum. These nuclear-powered states pledged to protect Ukraine's sovereignty, respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, abstain from economic coercion. They also pledged to not use force against Ukraine or threaten it. It took Russia just 10 years to violate all of these commitments. Moscow annexed Crimea in 2014. 8 years later, it has once again deployed troops to the border.
Yeah, and this would never have happened under Trump. Now, you might enjoy the next clip.
Yeah. Everyone saying, oh, he's a nuclear power. It's like they're afraid of him. You know, he was a friend of mine. I got along great with him. I say, Vladimir, if you're doing, we're hitting Moscow. I said, we're going to hit Moscow. And he sort of believed me, like 5%, 10%. That's all you need. He never did it during my time, John, you know.
No. No, it's
Why
funny.
did he do this during the last 4 years? Because he knew he couldn't.
It's funny how she didn't bother you either.
Yeah, no, she didn't bother me. I told her the same thing. That'll be next.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be next. Taiwan will be next. You won't have any computer chips. They'll blow them off the face of the earth.
Yeah, now that should have been Xi, not she. Yeah, now folks, I have no idea what Putin hopes to gain from this war. He's now a puppet of Xi Jinping, who will throw him under the bus as soon as he can. And the Ukrainians are never going to let him occupy their country. So he will be bogged down in a never-ending insurgency. All that death for what?